Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So nice to be with you all after the long break. Alhamdulillah. So happy to be back with you all. Inshallah, we'll get started with the dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance, and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Amen. So alhamdulillah, it's been about, I think, 3 weeks since the last time we were together. And inshallah, you guys are having a good summer. Inshallah, you're enjoying it. I don't know how many, for some people, summer is not much of a break, and for some people it is. So I hope, whatever it is for you, I hope it's enjoyable. I think we had, from 3 weeks ago, we had an assignment. And I don't know, Sophia, would you like to share it with us?
That work was internalize the name of Allah and believe it, knowing that Allah is aware of all we do. We have the basic rule of trust, especially during these days. Worship that matters the life of creation in some way is very heavily rewarding, and gave examples of not having an opportunity to facilitate and conciliation between mothers for acts of service and acts of love and service.
Thank you so much, and thank you for putting the reminder on the WhatsApp regularly for everyone as well. I know it's been a while, but can anyone recall if they were able to try to do the assignment, or if they have any reflections? I know maybe you probably did it in the first days of the Hijjah and then forgot about it, but if anyone has anything that they want to share regarding that, any thoughts?
Just like the acts of love and service, sometimes in this time we feel bad that we don't want to, because of this reminder, did something small. But what happened is we just, even though that's not what I was thinking for, the blessing and the rest of the day was sooner. The things that usually take a while, and the little things that are coming on. Waiting to on call for some services.
Yeah.
Everything just went sooner. It's like,
Oh, subhanAllah.
That's
That's really beautiful, mashallah. So for those who didn't hear online, the sister here shared that in trying to do acts of love and service that were sometimes you're tired and you don't want to do them, but you do them anyways. What she found is when she pushed herself, that other things in her day were facilitated, and things that normally are hard and difficult and have a challenge, where those challenges were just eliminated on that day. It reminds me of the narration that Allah is in the aid of his servant so long as his servant is in the aid of his brother or sister. So we had some divine help, inshallah, on that day. That's a really beautiful reminder, because I think that's when it comes to, like, when you're full of energy and your cup is full, it's very easy to give, right? It's very easy to be generous with people. It's very easy to serve people. But it's when you feel like you don't have very much left, and in that little bit that's left, someone needs something, and you actually do have the ability to help them, and you push yourself. You do also have the option to kind of like duck out of the way. But when you opt to take that last bit of capacity that you have and use it in the service of someone else, subhanAllah, there's always some unexpected good that comes, that tends to come your way, especially because maybe you're not even doing it for that reason. You know what I mean? You're just like, okay, I can do this. I'm going to try to do this. Yeah, because it's very similar to sadaqah itself. People, when they have a little bit of money, they think, okay, if I give this money away, then I'm going to have nothing left. But Allah replaces with what we give with more. So then usually that same person would end up getting a lot more unexpectedly from another place, because the source of that rizq and that sustenance is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So first of all, I never thought of it like that with your time or your energy. And this might be a dumb question, but does that always apply? Like, let's say you have a little bit of energy times left and someone else needs something for you, but you also need something for yourself. The amount of your body has already. You still always prioritize someone else and be like, Allah's going to give me more because I prioritize the other person. Or are there times where you like have to, like, the right thing to do in Allah's eyes is to do what you need to do?
It does make sense. I don't know if I'll ever use the word always in these situations, but is it always this or always that? I can't say always, but what I say is that if it's possible to help someone and in the process not harm yourself. So there's a difference between, like, I'm helping someone and that means I got no sleep, and I have a baby that's going to be awake at 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever it is. Then like a mother, for example, in that capacity, part of her self-preservation is this preservation of her entire family, right? For women especially, like, she's not going to be able to sleep in, right? Other times it's like, okay, you can sacrifice now, you're super tired, but you also, it's not like a make it or break it type situation where everything's going to fall apart the next day. You're not going to miss your flight. You're not going to, it's just, I think it depends on the circumstance. But as like a general thing is usually when we think we don't have much left in terms of capacity, when it comes to someone else and helping someone else, Allah gives us an energy that we didn't think we had if we just intend to do it. And not, again, like, I don't recommend self-harm, but maybe like less sleep, right? Like instead of 6 hours the next day, you get 4 hours the next day and you have to take a nap sometime, but that's, I think that's more along the lines of what I'm thinking about. Yeah. Any other thoughts? How about the beautiful name of Allah, Al-Khabir, and the one who's always informed?
Part of it is finding the that's like some structure. I've been struggling with that for now because I really think this assignment kind of helps me kind of like think about times like in the past that like I felt that I managed my time and kind of thinking about what it is that I did or like spiritually related and trying to think of those things. Hopefully better and like hopefully whatever time I'm doing kind of like using habits and things like that. So a lot of it for me was time management.
It's interesting because I just found this out when I was in Chicago for the intensives. We have different temperaments as people, as human beings. And for some of us to make the best use of our time, because our temperaments are more social, we do well with others, we do well in the company of other people. Our time is used well when we are doing what we have some people that kind of we're doing it with. If we're doing it all by ourselves, there's some people who they can't do it all by themselves. It's not that they can't, it's just that they find it more challenging. But if even 2 or 3 other people are doing it with them, then they just all do it together and they all do really well. Others are the opposite. It's like, if anyone else is involved, it's like an obstruction. Like I need to be alone. I need to do this my way. I don't need anyone to interfere with this or know about this. And so depending on our temperaments, apparently, some of us will do better with things like staying awake after Fajr and going to sleep on time or whatever it is, by having just a partner to check in with, and or a couple of people even just to check in with and say, okay, we're going to try to do this together. But yeah. One of the reflections I had about the beautiful name of Allah Al-Khabir is, this was just, I'm not going to give the context, right? So just take it as it is in the most general sense, is that sometimes if there is an issue or a problem that someone is having with someone else, right? It could an institutional, organizationally, on a community level, there can be a sense from the people who have observed or experienced harm that no one really understands. No one really understands what I just went through. No, and if I try to explain myself, they still don't get it, right? And likely I'm going to get blamed if I try to explain myself. And so that person will start to feel really isolated and feel like they don't belong, right? Because no one gets it. And I think one of the comforts of the beautiful name Al-Khabir is he's already informed and he already gets it and he fully understands and he knows the details and the subtleties that even you couldn't put into words. And so appealing to him, because sometimes we're in situations where we can't really explain like ourselves well, like we're not going to be eloquent in it, it's not going to be convincing, knowing whatever we try to say, there's going to be an assumption that's made. But then literally if we just turn to Allah and make dua and say, oh Allah, you know exactly what's going on, you know exactly where this is going from, and what I can't articulate it properly, it's missing the mark, no one's getting it. You know, help me in this, whatever that case is, would it help me in this issue? And then help comes, subhanAllah. And then this happened recently. There was something I was trying to articulate and on a group of people, on a WhatsApp group basically, and I couldn't explain it, and I wasn't good at trying to explain it. And at some point I literally just made dua. I was like, oh well, you know exactly what I'm trying to say, that even though I can't say it, you know, but like, can you show me if there's any good in what I'm trying to say? Can you show me essentially, like, can you manifest an example of that for me so that I can share that with people and be like, this is what I'm talking about? And alhamdulillah, like literally within the hour, someone sent me a forward of like a perfect example of what I was trying to say, a real life example. And so all I had to do was forward it and be like, that's what I'm talking about. And it just came at the right time. But it was so comforting, because it's sometimes you're in a situation, it's hard. It's a hard thing, but just knowing that he's informed always. And if no one else gets you and you're weird, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets us all. Alhamdulillah. So that was one of my reflections from the assignment, alhamdulillah. And here we have a beautiful reflection. So Assalamu alaikum, I had a sudden good fortune come my way through ways and means which I could not have foreseen. How Allah was facilitating me to this point. When du'as aren't answered, something we start wondering at the silence of God, but truly Allah is Khabir. While I had been tying my camel somewhere else, Allah brought my sustenance to me from a completely different source. And as always, his plan is better than mine. Inshallah. Thank you so much. That's really beautiful. And with that, we will start with the allegorical commentary on the verses that we covered last week or last time. And those were verses 8 through 10. So I'll read the English translation, and then we're going to talk about because we covered the tafsir of this already. We actually covered the meanings of these verses. So today there's symbolic meanings that Imam Ibn Ajiba calls our attention to. So we're going to cover what he mentions in this regard. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So believe in God and his messenger and the light we have sent down. God is aware of whatsoever you do. The day that he gathers you for the day of gathering, that is the day of mutual dispossession. And whosoever believes in God and works righteousness, he will absolve him of his evil deeds and cause him to enter gardens with rivers running below, to abide therein forever. That is the great triumph. And those who disbelieve and deny our signs, they are the inhabitants of the fire, abiding therein. What an evil journey's end. He says in this regard, so believe in Allah and his messenger with the iman of the eyewitness. Basically, the iman of the one who is seeing, right? Like when they say seeing is believing, as if you're seeing everything that you say you believe in. Not simply the iman or the faith of rational proofs, right? So there's rational evidences that we can argue why we believe in God. And he's saying, don't take your faith from the place of evidences to as if you are seeing it all. And he says, in other words, start with the faith of rational proofs and continue spiritually wayfaring to the station of seeing, and believe in the Qur'an and polish the mirror of your hearts until you hear it from us without an intermediator. And remember the day you will be gathered for the eternal gathering. And he says, to the people of al-Jama', the people who are of the gathered in this life. And then he says, that is the day of Taghabun. That is the day of, and here Taghabun has many translations. It indicates mutual dispossession, people taking from each other. It is also described as the day of loss, because certain people will lose, but because some will lose while they watch others do well. And they will they'll be in deep regret, and their sense of loss will be greater because they can see how far others have excelled. So he says that is the day of Taghabun. It says those who remember Allah dispossess the people who are negligent. And the people who strive hard dispossess the people who fall short. And the knowers of God dispossess the veiled from God. And then he says, and this is the great loss. So again, it's not that they physically dispossess from others. It's that they're elevated in such a way that it creates a sense of dispossession from others who don't receive what they receive. And it on that day invokes both regret and envy. And he says, and whoever believes in Allah and then strives to witness Allah and does righteous deeds, and these deeds are by Allah. And then he speaks or what he mentions is, I shouldn't say he speaks in the voice of, it's verses from the Quran, or what Allah says himself in the Quran. He says, we expiate him from his sins, which means seeing the metaphorical meaning of when God expiates from us our sins is that he covers for us our seeing our own good deeds. And he covers for us, or he covers for the person who's like this, them even seeing their own existence. And then he says that is to cover this person's attribute with my attribute. This is again in the voice of God. And his descriptions with my descriptions. And we enter him into the gardens of knowledge of God, beneath which the rivers of sciences and wisdoms flow. That is the supreme success. He says, removing the garments of metaphorical existence and then donning and wearing the garment of true existence is the supreme success. And those who reject the spiritual path and its signs, and those who guide to it, are the people who they're not of the fire of hellfire, but they're in the fire of being veiled. And they're veiled from the higher truths and realities that could be right in front of them become invisible to them because they're in denial of them in the first place. So those are his metaphorical or symbolic reflections from last week's verses, or last time's verses. And today we have verses 11 through 13 And inshallah, next week we'll finish the surah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله ومن يؤمن بالله يهدي قلبه والله بكل شيء عليم وأطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول فإن توليتم فإنما على رسولنا البلاغ المبين الله لا إله إلا هو وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. No misfortune befalls save by God's leave, and whosoever believes in God, he guides his heart. And God is knower of all things. Obey God and obey the messenger. Then if you turn away, only the clear proclamation is incumbent upon our messenger. God, there is no God but he, and in God let the believers trust. You'd be surprised how much tafsir there is on 3 verses. Okay. So for the first verse, here, where it says signs can also mean verses, well, in the verse before, and verse 10 would contain a direct reference to the Qur'an. These verses 10, 11, and 12 together are a reminder that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his followers, that no matter what they do, there are some who will continue to reject revelation, since only God can guide. And it's similar to in Surah Isra, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whomsoever God guides, he is rightly guided, and whomsoever he leads astray, you will find no protectors for them apart from him. This is also mentioned with the Kahf. It's Friday prayers. They start the khutbahs with this. Now, Imam Ibn Ajib, he mentions, where in commenting on ma asaba min musibatin, that no misfortune befalls, and he says misfortune of this life or the next, illa bi idhnillah, except by his decree and will, as if it is facing. And so here he's talking about musibah is like trial, right? Tribulation, test. He's like, it's as if the test is facing the human being, but it's stopped. And it's just waiting for the permission of God. And then whosoever believes in God, and he says to believe in God here, whosoever believes in God is that they affirm and they believe that, all that Allah has revealed and all of his appointed measures. So I thought this was interesting. It's not just believing in him, but believing in what he has decreed, that the decree is in the hand of God. And this is kind of like a running theme for these 3 verses in the tafsir of Ibn Ajib, that part of believing in God is in believing in his divine decree and accepting his divine decree and having trust in his divine decree. So this is kind of, he says here, وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ, usually that's just translated as in whoever believes in God. And he's like, believes in his revelation, but also believes in the decree. So they say there's Kitabullahi al-Maqru, the book of God that's written. And then there's Kitabullahi al-Mandur, the book of God that you see in the world around you. And part of what we see in the world around us is the decree of God constantly unfolding in front of our eyes. And then here he says, so whoever believes in God, yahdi qalbah, right? He guides his heart. And Imam Ibn Ajib, he says he guides his heart to contentment. So if you believe in Allah and you believe in his decree, then your heart will be guided to contentment and surrender. And that's one opinion. That's one of his opinions. And he says, or you believe in Arabic, it's al-istirja, this idea that you will be called upon and to return to him. So you would be of the people who not just says this, but you've accepted this in your being, that inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. These words are an evidence of the person whose heart has been guided. And then another position is that he guides his heart until that person, or he guides her heart until she knows that what hit her couldn't have missed her, and what missed her couldn't have hit her, right? We know the hadith. And the whole like what if situation that we see, it's very easy to fall into. Like if only this had happened, if only that had happened. And the Prophet tells us that if is from the shaitan. Why? Because the word if, it attacks our belief in the divine decree. So once something has happened and we recognize it as being from what God has decreed, we would accept that this has a wisdom in it that maybe we're veiled from, but we accept that there's wisdom in it. We don't say there's no wisdom in this, or there's no, because that's part of his decree. We're not going to ascribe something like that to his divine decree. We might say we don't know what it is. That's okay. But we're not going to say, oh, this was useless. Or this was, when a situation is something that we don't like, one of the things that we can do is learn from it as much as possible. So like, a situation occurs and you learn many, many, many lessons from those bad situations or difficult situations. And then it actually informs how you go about, the future. What are you going to avoid? What are you going to do better? Trying again, right? All is never lost, in that sense. When something bad happens, there's 1,000 good things that we can always benefit from that bad thing. And from our aqidah, we would say, like, these are some of my favorite words. I repeat them all the time. It just feels good to say it. It's like one of those positive affirmations. You could say it in the mirror 10 times in the morning, and it's going to make you feel good. which is that nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was. Right? That's one of my favorite lines. It's like nothing in the realm of possibility is better than what was. God knows not just what he has decreed, he knows the infinite possibilities of everything he did not decree. Right? So no, that's just Dr. Ahmed. Yeah. But there's another way to think about this in terms of the divine decree and God's all-encompassing knowledge and wisdom, is that the khair, or the good, is in whatever God has chosen, right? And I think it was Ali who said the only time he's more comforted from like having his dua answered as he has asked for it is when it's answered in a way that he didn't ask for it. Like basically the wording is even different than that. It's that the only thing that comforts him when he gets what he asked for is when he doesn't get what he asked for, because that to him is clearly what God's choice, God's choice in that matter is more clear to him. Mujahid said that yahdi qalba, that Allah guides their heart, means that if they are tested, they are patient, and if they are given, they are thankful, and if they are transgressed, they forgive. And that was, we could talk a lot about forgiveness, but forgiveness is also a journey. There are things that are very hard to forgive. There are things that are easy to forgive. Hopefully, small things we forgive easily. The tiffs, I hope, are not things that we allow for them to grow into a grudge that then we talk about this person has bad energy. Like you probably have bad energy, we don't like things to fester in our hearts. So easy things we should forgive easily, There's other things that are not so easy, that are very, very harmful, and they may take years to forgive. But essentially, forgiveness is not necessarily what someone else deserves. You don't do it because they deserve to be forgiven. You do it because, like ihsan, the highest possible sort of way of dealing with someone like that is eventually actually forgiving them. And that's a much longer discussion, which we don't have time to get into today. But I thought it was really interesting that this idea of the heart being guided has these three qualities: that when they are tested, they're patient; when they're given, they're thankful; and when they're transgressed, they forgive. Ibn Atiyah also recorded from the Mufassirin, from other commentators of the Hadith, that whoever acknowledges the decree, the trial is actually made lighter for them. And because of the fact that they surrender to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes a difficulty comes and people are just resisting. right? They're resisting the reality in front of them. And does it mean like, what does resistance mean? It's a questioning of why for the past, not for the present or the future, what to do, but there's a sense of resistance of like, why did it need to be that way? Why did it have to be like that? And obviously, like there's things that nobody likes, like it's part of the nature of this life is we're going to be tested with things we don't like. But if we have a good opinion of Allah, then even when we are afflicted with something we don't like, there's a sense of acceptance. Like in the end, this is what he decreed, and I'm going to have adab with his decree. I'm going to receive this, like, you know, with a sense of surrender to his divine wisdom, and hope to, if there's a benefit from this, to try to look for those things which benefit, maybe the lessons. So apparently the one who said this is Imam Ghazali, because I think Dr. Ahmad quotes Imam Ghazali a lot, so that would make sense. Yeah. The Arabic was said by Ghazali, the English was said by him. Or repeated, you should say the translation. Now, وَاللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. And God is knower of all things. And here he says he knows. And again, this clause is repeated so many times in the Quran, but every time that a clause comes, maybe the shade of meaning that Imam Ibn Ajiba gives to it is a little bit different depending on the context of the verse and where it is within the surah that it's in. So here he says, he knows that which is in the hearts from the coolness of contentment to the heat. How he says hararatu tadbir, like the heat of sort of selfish management and overplanning. You know how like anxiety in this country is one of the biggest mental health issues afflicting, and it's the Muslim community is not immune to it either. Obviously, it is an actual thing, but there's a peace of mind that truly comes from, I trust God. You know, there's a peace of mind that comes from, I'm gonna try my best, but if it doesn't go the way I want it to, it's okay. Everything's gonna be fine because God only decrees what's best. Not laziness, not something that's gonna invoke laziness, but something that's like, everything's gonna be okay because God is great. You know, like just having that versus like what happens if this happens, and what happens if I don't do this, and what happens if I don't get into this college, and what happens like the whole like over planning, and if I don't do the right thing, then I'm going to lose my entire life and everything's going to be a waste. And we don't, alhamdulillah, have to have that kind of says hararat tadbir. It's like the heat of, I would say the exhaustion of managing everything in that way. Obey God and obey the messenger. Then if you turn away, only the clear proclamation is incumbent upon the messenger. And here, from a Quranic perspective, to obey the messenger is also to obey God. Because Allah says in the Qur'an Surah An-Nisa, whosoever obeys the messenger obeys God. And also that whoever supports the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu is also someone who will prosper. In Surah Al-A'raf, that thus those who believe in him, honor him, help him. And him here means the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu and follow the light that has been sent down with him, which is understood by many to be the Quran. It is they who shall prosper. Another major message from this verse is that the prophets are only responsible for delivering the message that salvation or damnation of human souls is for God alone to determine. And I think that's really interesting because people always come and ask religious leaders, if I do X, Y, Z, am I going to hell? It's like, I'm not God, you know, we can't tell you that. No human being can tell you the answer to that question because that's for God alone. We can say there are certain things that God has forbidden. He has described the people who do those things and then they don't repent for them as being people who would fall into punishment, but as a general category, but we don't know. At the end of the day, we don't know. That is for God alone. Imam Ibn Ajiba, he also brings another shade of meaning to this. And he says that in all that, obeying Allah is in all that he has commanded. And again, he really emphasizes this point from these verses, and obeying Allah from all that he has commanded. And from the things he's commanded is actually his divine decree. So we would have contentment with God's religion, and we have contentment with his divine decree. That's actually one of the ways that we obey God, is having contentment. And he says, especially during tests and tribulations. Now that's what's due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then when it says, and obey the messenger, Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions that in what is his sunnah of beautiful character. And here Imam Ibn Ajiba's emphasizes that Allah repeats, obey Allah. And he doesn't say, and the Prophet. He says, obey Allah and obey the Prophet, to draw a distinction. That the kayfiyah, or the how of how we obey God, is not necessarily the same how of how we obey the Prophet Muhammad. From the Prophet Muhammad, we're looking at his sunnah. We want to embody his beautiful character, his example, the things that he's taught us to do. But from when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's more than that. It's that life itself, we treat it with a sense of like our reception to what we have in life itself. We try to treat it with contentment because we see it as also being part of what God has decreed or commanded to exist in the world. So the Prophet Muhammad is not in charge of the divine decree, right? So there's no like rida or contentment or tawakkul in that sense that's related to him, because he doesn't control the affairs of the earth. That belongs to God. So our obedience to God, really part of what our obedience to God includes, is this sense of contentment with him and developing that. And then it says, right? So if you turn away, and here what is being referred to is if someone turns away from obedience to God and they turn away from obedience to the Prophet Muhammad, it says the two obediences, then truly, then truly, the only thing that's upon the Prophet is to convey the message. And he says, this is the reason for the answer to the conditional statement that is implied. So let me explain. Meaning, if you turn away, then there is no blame on the Prophet Muhammad as he is only responsible for delivering the message, right? He's not responsible for saving you. He's not responsible for putting you in paradise. He's not responsible for you accepting guidance. He's only responsible. There's no blame on the Prophet, because his only responsibility to God is to deliver the message. And he has already done that in a way that, he's not responsible for more. And then he says that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is mentioned in the possessive form. So here, when it says, فَإِنَّمَا عَلَى رَسُولِنَا, so upon our messenger, the possessive form, so Rasul is mudaf, right? Rasulina, na is mudaf ilay. So, and translation of that is that, like, God is referring to the Prophet as his. He's directly connecting. He doesn't just say my, he says the royal we, right? He is our messenger. And this way of being mentioned in the possessive form, belonging to God as us, is actually to reveal the station of honor of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and also to emphasize that his job or his duty towards God is simply to deliver the message. It's also to kind of vilify is the wrong word, but to kind of blame anyone who would turn away from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring in this way. So there's like a warning, like, he's our messenger. Don't be from those who turn away from him. God, there is no God but he, and in God let the believers put their trust, or let the believers trust. And here, Imam Ibn Ajiba mentions that no one other than God has the right to be worshipped. There's only one in existence that has the right to be worshipped, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the meaning of La ilaha illallah. And upon Allah, we invest our full trust, and only him our full trust. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ encouraged us to put our whole trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until God helps us, and so that He helps us. So one of the secrets of trusting God is that the trust invites the answer. It invites the support. It invites the help. Usually in people's stories, a moment will happen in a difficult situation where all of a sudden they stop and they just pray, right? And they ask God, and they realize like they've been trying to handle something completely on their own or with their friends or whatever it is, and then they just realize they need to just ask God, right? That's what I really need to do. And then the story after that moment tends to change. And then also that in the Arabic, where it says وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the subject and the predicate response, right? So normally you would say, let the believers put their trust in God. But this says, in God, let the believers put their trust. So what this means is only in Him. I want to say this framework, for lack of a better term, it means when you put the words in that order, it emphasizes that only in God and only upon Allah do we put our trust. And we put our trust in Him first. So he says it indicates also the high station of tawakkul itself. That the command for trust in God starting with God's name and upon God. It indicates the high level of the high spiritual level of what tawakkul is, and the command to it. As God's worship requires, and he says, and this is again Imam Ibn Ajiba, as God's worship requires devotion to Him and turning to Him fully and cutting ourselves off from reliance from all others in an instant. So those are that's the actual commentary. And in terms of just, I wanted us to focus on this last part for the assignment in terms of let the believers put their trust. So this section that I'm going to cover with you all now is review. We've done it before. But this is one of those like core Islamic principles or values or you could say practices. Like tawakkul is one of them. I don't personally think that we could ever talk about it enough. I can read it over and over again and about it over and over again, the same words, and take something from it each time. And one of the important things about like developing the spiritual practice is review helps, because you're not the same person today that you were yesterday. You're not the same person today that you were 2 weeks ago. The same surah that you recite today is different because you're not the same person. And so even if it's the same, inshallah, I hope and pray that we benefit from the review. So the beautiful name of Allah, Al-Wakil, literally means the trustee, right? The one that we would place our trust in Him. So Al-Wakil means the one who is responsible for the affairs and needs of creation, that He is the one who takes it upon Himself to tend to His servants' needs and freely administer their affairs in accordance to what He has willed. When the Most High attends to His servants' needs and He enriches him, rendering him free of need from all others, and blesses him with His providential care, sufficing him from every preoccupation. He enriches him and makes him free from every other and every peer. And so the servant does not consider his needs too numerous, for he knows that his trustee and guarantor is none other than his master and Lord. So there's a category of people, like we can say this for ourselves, we are people that we take means, right? They say take the asbab, tie the camel, but you put your trust in God. There are people who, I'm not saying they don't tie the camel, but there are people whose trust in God is so high that what they need actually does come to them without a whole lot of them seeking it. So there are people like that on this earth. Their trust is, and the idea that I am as my servant thinks I am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to us how we truly believe He is. So if our iman is not there yet, right, and we don't actually believe He is the way that he actually is, we could try to do the same actions as someone else and it will not mean the same results, right? Because our faith isn't there yet. It's kind of like when Abu Bakr Siddiq, when he donated all of his wealth. When the Prophet ﷺ asked him, what did you leave for your family? He said, I left Allah and his messenger. Meaning like, I have full trust that they're going to be fine. Another companion tried to do the same thing and the Prophet ﷺ didn't let him. He said, take half of it and take care of your family. So we don't, I want to say we strive in baby steps and gradually try to increase our trust, right? So some of these stories are like, they're amazing because it shows, they're symbolic to us and showing to us that God's promise is true, that there are people who attain these levels of trust and he responds to them with what he promises, right? So, I mean, the Prophet Muhammad said, if we trusted Allah the way the birds did, right? Like they leave in the morning and their stomachs are empty, they come back, their stomachs are full. And they know they're not going to go hungry. They know they're going to have food. They're given their rizq in that way. So so there's a story here, and it's related that Ahmed ibn Khudraway. So I had to look up this person because I'm like, I just want to know where this person lies on the historical timeline. He was a famous sheikh, and he was born in 762 AD. He died in 854 AD. His name was Abu Hamid Ahmed al-Balkhi. He was Afghan. That was nice to find out. We have Afghans in our Islamic history. Literally in Afghanistan. Like Khorasan includes a bigger area outside of that, but he's like from there. His teacher, it says that he was a known sheikh in his own time, but he was also known as someone who studied and learned from another famous sheikh named Abu Yazid al-Bistami, who was from present-day Iran. And Abu Yazid al-Bistami is a famous sheikh of his own time. He was given the nickname Sultan al-Arifin, the Sultan of the Knowers of God. This was in the Abbasid era, and from his teachers was Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, great grandson of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq was someone who taught Abu Hanifa directly, Imam Malik directly. He was the father-in-law of Sayyidah Nafisa, who taught Imam Shafi'i directly, and then Imam Shafi'i taught Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. So you always see this name, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq. We don't have a full biography of him, but we just know he's taught all these giants. So who was he? So this is where the spiritual lineage, you could say, goes through. And his lineage goes back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Ahmed ibn Khudraway was on his deathbed. And he owed, so these things are, by the way, when they're recorded, they're not, because a group of people have witnessed them, it's kind of like mutawatir, right? Like you can lie about someone if it's like one person. But if it's something that a whole group witnessed, then it was a lot of people saw this happen. So on his deathbed, he owed 70,000 dirhams. He says, which is 700 mithqals. I don't know what that is, but apparently it's a lot of money. So he convened a meeting with all of his debtors, and he made a dua, oh God, let my soul be a pawn in their hands. If you will to take my soul, then see that their rights are fulfilled. At that very moment, someone knocked on the door and said, everyone to whom Ahmed owes money should step outside. And the man paid his debt. And after the unnamed person came and paid back the debt that was owed to all these people, and after the debt was paid, then Ahmed ibn Khudraway died. May Allah have mercy upon him. So, I mean, this is just a sign of like trust that his needs were fulfilled. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And whoever puts their trust in God, then he is sufficient for him. So Imam Ibn Ajibah, he says, he who knows that the real, and here Allah al-Haq, is his trustee, will entrust all of his needs with him. He will not attempt to manage his own affairs alongside him, and he will not rely upon any except him. The Most High says, and whosoever trusts in Allah, then he is sufficient for him. We connect with this beautiful name by turning resolutely to him, asking that he makes our certitude, like our beliefs, our iman itself sound, so that we rely upon none but him, and return to none but him, and submit ourselves and resign our affairs to none but him. We cultivate this name in our character by being a trustee of those who are our dependents. And here, he's actually referring to like kids, for those who are parents, and for people who really, they rely on you for everything. If they're the ones entrusting you, then you are now responsible to teach them their religion. That's how you fulfill the role of being a trustee. So he says you teach them your dependence, obedience to God and in the faith, but also acceptance and a good opinion of the divine decree. So, I want to say, like, to me, this was really beautiful, because I feel like we raise children, alhamdulillah, usually to like know their 5 pillars and to know their 6 pillars of Iman, and know their do's and don'ts, know what they believe in general sense. But this idea of always have a good opinion of God, always have a good opinion of whatever happens, always try to find the good in what has happened, all like God's on your side, you know what I mean? Like everything is always happening for you. Developing that good opinion in kids is part of how we develop their faith. We're responsible for that, like that to teach them that. And this is also from the teaching of our faith. And I don't think for myself, I think I learned that God loves us, and I think I learned from the God that He has helps and saves the prophets and all these different things. But this idea of having a really good opinion of Him as a child in this way, with all that happens, I don't think I was taught that. Not in Sunday school, nowhere in particular. But it's like this is a specific things that's like needs to be embedded in the hearts of young souls, and they can receive it. So may Allah grant us the gift to do that. So how do we do this? How do we do this selective thing? Also, Imam Ibn Ajib, he says that dependence on God is when your heart has such assurance in God that it ceases to rely on anything else. It is to be attached to God and rely upon Him for all things, based on the knowledge that He is the knower of all things, and that what is in God's hand is more certain than what is in your own. The lowest degree for this is to be with God like someone who has entrusted their affairs to a kind and caring confidant. So if you're telling someone about something you're going through, you might ask for their advice, if they have advice, right? This is like a caring confidant, but you're still managing it yourself. You're like telling them, if they say something to you, you might be receptive to it, but overall, you're still in charge. You still see yourself as the one who's going through this. The second level is to be with God like an infant is towards their mother, that cries when it's hungry for milk, or cries when it needs a diaper change. Right? And essentially, the infant cries for their mother when they're in need. Outside of that, they feel secure because they know their mother's around, so they feel secure. But then, like they have selective attachment at times of need, and that's not a bad place. That's the second level of tawakkul. But generally speaking, when things are good, you have your trust in God. When things are not so good, you're going to call out to Him for help. And this is the highest degree, is actually to be free from both of these things. It's free from selective need. It doesn't have doubt. In the first level, there's doubt about whether or not there will be an answer. It's also someone who's effaced from yourself. And so he says the highest degree is that you're like a body in the hands. You're like actually a dead body, a corpse, in the hand of the one who's washing it, getting it ready for burial. So that's the highest level of trust. A corpse can't even move, right? A corpse is just laying there, but it's just getting washed and turned around, and it's in complete surrender. And this is with God. So attaining tawakkul and trust in God is a practice. It's not, and this is what is mentioned, is that the beginning of this practice is actually patience and spiritual effort. And the middle of this practice is a sense of peace, even while some thoughts of maybe annoyance or displeasure might remain. And the end is happiness, peace, in the absence of these thoughts. So, and this relates also to contentment and submission, because they're related. You can't be content with God's decree. I shouldn't say that. If you have contentment with God's decree and you have submission with His decree, your sense of trust will grow. If you're in a place of discontentment with God's decree, your trust in Him will weaken. So one affects the other. So I want to say you start with contentment. And so you think about all the things you're not content with, right? Whatever they are, whatever's bothering you. And you have to literally practice contentment with it. Contentment doesn't mean this is like the way it needs to be forever. Contentment is, I'm content with the decree of God that He has chosen this at this time. It doesn't mean that tomorrow that needs to be the case, you know. So again, contentment, I'm going to just spend a little bit and then we'll close. Contentment, rida, is to meet tribulations with a smile on your face, to have joy in your heart as destiny unfolds, to leave the choice to God and all that He has planned and brought about, to feel relief in your chest, and to be without criticism for what comes from God, the one, the overwhelming. Now, for people who are super connected to God, they can't handle anyone complaining about anything, because to them, all complaints are filtered, and it sounds like you're complaining about God. So they can't handle it. I remember we're trying to do a feedback session for something once, and I was like, we should have, and then there was a brother who's like, no, we're not gonna talk about God. We're not talking about God. I was like, oh, but I realized that he was internalizing the feedback session as a complaint against God. And I actually was impressed because I was like, this actually shows where he is in his own dhikr, his state of remembrance was that. Now, does that mean that we can't have feedback sessions? No, because it's not about being discontent with the past. It's about learning a lesson for the future, and accepting the past as being, from what God has decreed, and being full of wisdom and being full of blessings that we may not see. So, but it was really interesting because he couldn't talk about the program in a way, in any kind of negative light, because for him he just saw everything as being like God, the unfolding of God's plan. So submission, taslim, is to serenely relinquish yourself from self-direction and choice to the flow of divine decree. It is synonymous with the third meaning. Well, I'll leave that. So contentment is at the moment a divine decree comes to pass, whereas submission and surrender is often before it comes to pass. Submission and surrender is like an attitude, right? It's like a way of being. Ibn Ata'illah, he says, like the regular person, they wake up in the morning and they say, what am I going to do today? And the wise person wakes up and says, what is God going to do with me today? So they're in a state of, their baseline is a sense of surrender. It doesn't mean that they don't do a lot. They're usually some of the most productive human beings on earth, but they do that through the surrender to God. He says, it is in fact identical to tafweed, which means to leave your destiny wholly in God's hands. And again, this is a practice. It's literally a practice. He says the beginning is patience and spiritual effort. When it comes to these things, it comes down to thoughts. He says the middle of it is peace, even while some thoughts of annoyance and displeasure remain. So it's like, to practice contentment, to practice trust, to practice surrender and submission, we have to rewrite our own thoughts. We have to see what's going on, delete what we don't want, affirm what we do want in there, and try to hold on to that. And he says the end is happiness, peace, and the absence of these thoughts. He also says something that I think is going to give us all a sense of relief. I was really happy when I read this. He said, an initial reaction that lacks this virtue of contentment, surrender, and trust, initial reactions to like bad things or difficult things, is forgiven in all cases, for human nature is weak and no human being is entirely free of this. Okay, so, alhamdulillah. But the assignment for us is actually to, and this is for those who may not do this already, and see how much of this you can do. If you can't do this number, that's fine. But if you can do daily 200 times to recite Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, right? That Allah is sufficient for us and He is the best of those to entrust our affairs. That's really what it means. But while you're thinking it, while you're saying it, to actually try to bring up to the surface the thoughts of the things you're not content with, the things that are bothering you, your worries, the things you're kind of like, when is this going to happen? When is that going to happen? All of that, bring that to the surface. And like, I want to say, like, delete the thought with this dhikr, reset the thought with this dhikr. And you can just, if you have prayer beads, there's like 100 count prayer beads, just go through that set twice. And you don't have to be like for every single hasbunallah, I have to think of a negative thought. But like as you're doing it, try to see what comes to the surface from thoughts of discontent, from your worries, finances, school, marriage, work, whatever it is, like all those things, kids, the things that tend to like get in our way and create blocks within ourselves, like just let those come to the surface and reaffirm that Allah is sufficient for us and He's the best of those to entrust our affairs, and literally try to, as if you're giving everything to Him. That's going to be the assignment for this week. And inshallah, it is time to pray Maghrib. So we will just close with dua now and then pray. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى. علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم. آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen.